Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for having me.
Awesome. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
Yeah, so I'm still in the country I was born in, which is the Czech Republic in Europe, in Prague, which a lot of people love.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's a great place. Yeah, very good. My father's from Greece, and so I get to go to Europe and that, and it's a good place to be. Now, I've given our listeners a little bit of an introduction to you about your background, but we would love you to share more. Tell us more about you and what you've done and what your background is.
Yes, I believe what's important to say is that nobody in my family is an entrepreneur, so I never had somebody leading an organization in my family or around me. So until 18 years old, I was just had this employee mindset, knowing I will do corporate job later on, and that's what I follow. Until I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad, which changed my perspective to what is possible, what I want to do with my life, and that one day I want to have a business. But I still didn't have much idea. So until the age of 22, I was still reading books, getting inspiration from other people, studying at university. But then I had a big moment in my life, big realization, and I just quit my last job, which was delivering food for Uber Eats. So I believe it's important to mention that people can change rapidly if they make some serious decisions. And I went from the age of 22 being very not confident, insecure, basically not knowing what to do with my life, to 3 years later, now I own 3 businesses. Both of them did, or two of them did over 7 figures already. And I'm now leading over 20 employees.
Oh, that is awesome, man. Congratulations. That's really cool. Cool story as well.
Thank you.
So there you go, listeners, going from an Uber Eats to going actually making a decision. And Vash, what you actually just shared there, I think is really amazing, which is you quit your job because people can change rapidly when they make a decision. And I think a lot of leaders are not making decisions. Nothing worse than a leader that can't make decisions. That's really crazy, but it's nothing worse than that. But you're right. People can make decisions and they can change rapidly if they really want to, right?
Yeah, exactly. They need to have, we could call it leverage or reason why. Because for me, to give you some context, I'm delivering these food for Uber Eats. I'm not in pain. I'm still making some money studying university. I'm young. But then I saw these people in their 30s, 40s, 50s doing the same job. And I just saw that they're unhappy. They can't provide for their families. They don't have enough time for them. And I was like, no more. And that was almost the moment when I finally was able to make a decision. No, Vash, we are going to do the scary thing, which is start a business that you've never started before. And that's when it changed for me. So I believe people need to find their reason why for the change, because without a strong why, you will give up, you will make a decision, and a week later you will go back. So yeah, strong reason why.
Yeah, and I think it's true that anywhere what we're doing in life, whether it be a role, a leadership role in a large corporate, small corporate, entrepreneur, if we don't know what our why is and it gets a little bit cold and it's a little bit cold in the morning, it's dark, because actually I'd just rather stay in bed. Then if your why is not big enough, you're going to stay there. And if it gets a little bit harder or things don't go well, don't go your way, that's when people start to be like that. And so I think you're right. It's finding your way is really important here. And it's a big thing for people to understand. And I don't know about you, but do you think that people find their why straight away? In other words, they take a red pill, blue pill, green pill and go, ta-da, I know my why? Or does it take time?
I would say it takes time with yourself, which is very rare nowadays. Nowadays, a friend goes toilet, we immediately go on our phone. People have extra the day, they start sorting out emails and getting bombarded by news or YouTube videos. So I believe most people never spend time alone with themselves. And I believe the reason why is already within each one of us, but we just need to have the time to find it. Sometimes it gets triggered by external situation like it did for me, but then I spend time with myself, really going deeper. Okay, I'm ready to make a change. Why is it important to me? Why I'm not going to give up until I get to my goal. So I believe it could be combination from something external, some trigger. Maybe we see somebody more successful and we say, "Oh, I want that," but now we need to back it up with reason why, and then the reason can be found by spending maybe Friday till Sunday alone in nature, in nice Airbnb with no distractions, no electronics. And I believe the answers are within us. We just need to discover them by spending time with ourselves.
Listeners, if you're not already taking notes and you haven't already got some big insights already, I don't know what to say to you, because the thing is, what you've just shared there is huge in the sense that spending quality time with yourself. I think that a lot of people hide behind emails and messages and I'm really busy. Come on, it's just noise. But if you don't take time out to spend time with yourself, look after yourself, think about things, think through things, then you're going to find things very hard. When you talked about the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, have you read it once or have you read it many times?
So this book, I believe I read it twice when I started. There are books I read 10 times, but
Oh,
this
yeah.
was almost this first kind of impulse. And I always tell people we live in a box. And the box depends on how big it is, depends on who raised us, what experiences we were exposed to. And I'm from the Czech Republic, not many opportunities back then here. I wasn't exposed to wealth. I wasn't exposed to entrepreneurship. So my box was very small to what's possible and not. But once I started reading books, it opened the books. And that's why I believe investing in mentors or expanding our mind to different networks of people is so crucial, because you might be thinking, okay, for my business, the limit is here. But then you speak to a person who has the limit 100 times wider than you, and you will find out what's possible. So,
Mm.
yeah, it opened my eyes to new
Yeah, I think
possibilities.
so I think if you, what I'm hearing here is that the books that you're reading and the people that you've met, in other words, the mentors, people who are successful already, getting around them to get a bigger vision and understand where you could go is great. One of the questions I've got for you is, how did you actually get into leadership? Now, whether it's from the Uber Eats days straight into your own business or later on, because now you're saying you've got 20 employees, but how did you actually get into leadership?
Yeah, I believe I got into leadership because I believe leadership starts with us, right? And I believe I started with leadership when I read the first book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, because from that point onwards, I started building a foundations that later on I could build a great team on, great business on. So I started by working on myself first. But then as I started growing my business, what started happening, of course, I didn't want to be the one man show. I didn't want to be the guy running it. I wanted to be the guy who is just having more and more impact. And for bigger impact, you usually need more and great people. So I got there by basically starting my business. But I would say it started years before that, when I started working on waking up early. Whatever I say, I do, being reliable, being able to switch myself from unresourceful states, we could say, to more resourceful state, to know how to handle my emotions and all of these things. So I believe my leadership started probably at the age of 18.
I'm in Chicago, so I'm on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. The other side of the pond. So it's like you said before, two guys on the other, on each side of the pond having a chat. And technology is wonderful. And speaking of technology, tell us a little bit more about your background, because I think you've been involved quite a bit with technology.
Yeah, so my last 20 years has been in tech, in probably the most, or at least arguably one of the most complicated areas of tech, which is in healthcare. As you probably know, healthcare is the largest industry in our economy and probably the one with most issues and the one that's most in need of technology. So I really grew up having to grow up the market. So I was very involved in putting the infrastructure and the foundation in place for electronic health records. And for the last 10 years, I've done the same thing on the financial side of healthcare, really helping to clarify the cost of healthcare make it easier to attack it.
And I see that you are the CEO and founder of an organization called In Common. Tell us more about that organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. So after 20 years of health tech and really 30 years in healthcare, I decided to make a pretty big pivot. So I was 10 years in at running a company, had gone great. And so the wind was at our backs, but I didn't feel it. So it was, I don't know, in some ways the job had lost its challenge, I would say, Dennis. The other part of it was there was something else I think I needed to do that my prior job was telling me it was time to do. Our company had become one of the top rated companies in the world in terms of employee experience on Glassdoor, which is a definitive standard.
Oh, yeah.
But during COVID, that started to change, and as it did with everybody. So I really left because I wanted to attack that problem. My, I guess, really high level concept here, if you want to zoom out, would be that we're going through the biggest and fastest change in the history of how we work and live. And so we're really living history right now. So the question is, how do we make the future different than the past? And that's what I left to go on a journey to research that, to reflect on that, and to share what I learned and to help create potentially a solution to that problem.
Wow, I love that. And Dan, I know that you were a CEO of Strata before. That was a 500 plus people, so a tech company and so forth. But what I'm quite interested in to hearing what you just said there was that the wind was behind our backs, but I wasn't feeling it. And then you decided to move on to go and pursue that and find that. I think there's a lot of people today who are not happy or bored or really wanting that next challenge. And what would be some of the things that you went through to help you get out of where you are to go into something else, to get that challenge, to do something else? What would be one or two things you might want to share with the listeners about what they should be thinking about or doing and preparing for that?
Yeah, what's maybe a little bit unique about me, I'm probably the one CEO who quit during the Great Resignation, right? Most people were trying to hold on to their jobs. I was left to find something that I felt could be the next challenge for me. And I tend to do, I'm a little bit of a long distance runner. So I have a marathon type of mentality. I tend to do things in essentially 10-year sprints or 10-year runs. So I was coming up on 10 years, and literally 10 years to the day that I left or that I joined the company, 10 years to the day, I decided that was going to be my last day. So here's what I would say to you. So I teach a class at a university here in Chicago called Loyola. And the class I teach is on decision strategy. So to me, the way I teach this class is that the decisions you make, yeah, those are important, but it's really what you make of your decisions, right? And so I think you can be in your job and it could be great or horrible. You can move and it could be great or horrible. The X factor is in what you make of it. And so for me personally, I'm a bit of a challenge junkie. Like I need to feel like I'm doing something and that's progressive in terms of my personal growth. It turns out I'm not alone. So we'll get into it when you and I were talking about this a little bit before, when we chop it up. But there's really very consistent themes, and the data all points to the same exact reasons why people leave jobs for the most part. And we can talk a little bit more about that when you want to get into it. But for me, it was really simple. I needed a new challenge, right? And I wasn't feeling the things that I really valued about my job within my job anymore. So I was really somebody who had built high growth companies or helped build high growth companies based on culture. And when I say culture, here's what I mean. The feeling of the people who work for the company and also the customers who we serve.
Right.
And in both cases, and one company grew from 50 people to 5,000 people. The other company grew from 50 people to 500 people. In both cases, these were companies where people loved to work and customers loved to work with us. And that feeling in many cases, Dennis, is not there for people right now. The workplace has become very transactional and very transitional. People don't feel that pride and purpose in work. And really what I thought was, zooming out once again, no, we don't need to think about how to bring people back, quote, to work. We need to think about how to bring people forward to the future. And that's really what I've been spending my time on, is really taking this sort of negative narrative that's out there, which to me, when you have moments like this, they are target rich. I know your podcast is on leadership, and oh my God, is it changing? But the one thing you always know about leadership is that crisis creates opportunity, right? And so when there's a problem, and I don't want to call myself a leader, but if you feel like you're a leader, right? If anyone feels like they're a leader, boy, that's when you're like this is my opportunity to prove it, right?
Yep. And I think it's the thought leader, right? It's how you actually put things into place. And I'm taking so many notes from what you've actually just been sharing and saying, because I want to get into these questions because I'm sure some more is going to be coming out of it. But I think a little bit later on is, I love what you said about what you make of your decision is really important. And I think it's the question later on, if I don't get to it, I will think about it and maybe you'll go through it when we go through our questions. But it's about when is the right time for a leader to lead, because sometimes I think they stay too long. And so we'll get into that. But the question I've got here for you, Dan, is how did you actually get into leadership?
Yeah, once again, I'll give it maybe a slightly different spin than most people you probably talk to. I would say when I was growing up, I was probably the last person who somebody would have pegged to be a leader, much less a CEO. I grew up incredibly introverted and had good reasons for it. I was dyslexic, so school was tough. I was a different kind of kid, so I was constantly bullied. And my father left before I turned 1 year old. So that pretty much killed my ability to trust anyone. But eventually I grew out of that. And over the last 30 years, I've been more or less on a journey. But I would say this, I've always been fascinated, even though I never thought I would be one. I was always fascinated by the topic, right? And really obsessed by it. Hundreds probably of books, hundreds of documentaries or biographies, however you want to look at those. But I didn't really get what leadership was until I did it. So my first shot at a leadership role was in my late 20s. I was managing a really small team and I made really big mistakes. And so I learned from these mistakes and I was interested in learning. So now I feel like I'm in a zone where I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and maybe have a different flavor or different perspective on leadership than maybe some other people. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what you just said about learning from mistakes is really important for us all to do that. And what you're doing today in life and in business would have been those lessons of the past, the foundations of the past, setting you up to what you're doing today. And you probably wouldn't be doing what you're doing today without that experience.
Yeah, that's true. And I know both of you and I share a common background in tech. And the one thing you learn about tech is it's iterative. So you don't think about mistakes or failures. It's all part of the process. And I think over time, when you mature, you realize that it's hard when you're young to have that perspective because we grow up being evaluated and graded. So we expect to have that same type of experience when we're working. And so we really condition people in exactly the wrong way to transition into work. And we have to, spend some time, primarily our 20s, getting over ourselves and realizing it's not about a scorecard, right? It's really about helping to help people around you and advance the business that you're in, which is obvious, but it just takes a while to get that perspective down.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.